Well, hello, Sally. I'm excited to have you on the podcast today to talk about your health success story, which is absolutely fascinating. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Casey. I'm glad to be here and have the opportunity to share this with others too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you're here to share. So, kind of let's go back to the beginning to when your health issues started, which were pretty early on. What did that look like for you, and how did it affect your life?
Well, since I was young, I always had stomach issues. And growing up, I remember I used to have stomach ache. My stomach would get bloated up. And my parents would take me to the doctor, but they really didn't find much. All they would tell her to give me was Pepto-Bismol. So, from the younger age up to maybe even my teens, it was manageable. I had some issues, but back then, they really didn't know, I think, much about celiac. So when I got into my 20s, about 23, was when it really started hitting me hard. That's when my symptoms became more severe. It started out with first the skin problems, really, really bad acne all over my face, joint pain. Every time that I would eat, it didn't sit right. Either I had uh, diarrhea or I had a constipation. And I would go to the doctor and they would do all the blood tests, all the diagnostic procedures, and they couldn't find anything. So after a while, and I'm sure like many people out there, when they've done everything they can and they've looked at every blood test and they can't find anything, they start suggesting that it might be psychosomatic.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah,
So,
I've heard that before.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And and I dealt with that for a long time. Many times they just wanted to give me a bottle of pills just to um, take away the pain or the symptoms that I was having. But I remember, things just kept getting worse over time. My hair was falling out. I remember one day getting up from bed, and I was gonna go to another side of my home, and I just dropped to the floor. It felt like somebody just took a bat and knocked my legs from right under me because I couldn't feel them for like a few seconds. And
Wow.
I think that was the most scariest part in my life because,
Mhm.
here I was, well, if the doctors can't help me, then, who can? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. You start to lose hope when the people who are supposed to be able to help you are not, and don't have answers. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting that you shared the list of symptoms that you have, and they're not just digestive for celiac.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Because, when you have celiac, the gut lining is affected. So with that comes you not being able to absorb many nutrients, many amino acids. So all the symptoms that are linked to the deficiencies of different vitamins or amino acids is what you begin to experience. And I think that's why, it was so hard to pinpoint because it's not just gut issues. And I think, in our medical mainstream, they're very uh part specific focused. If you go, you're just looking at the stomach and they don't look at anything else. If you go and you have a skin problem, they don't make the connection. I had to go deal with one doctor for the skin, another one for the joint pain, another one for, and yet all of these problems, they were all connected.
Mhm.
That was a big
Yeah.
frustration. And I think a lot of people go through that. Even now, it's just the way that medicine is practiced.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Missing that holistic approach to really looking at the whole body. For
Mhm.
sure. So how ultimately did you get a celiac diagnosis?
Oh, well, after hundreds of blood testing and a lot of diagnostic procedures, I remember I was crossing down Columbia Presbyterian, I think the hospital, but also there's the university. And I came across this self-diagnostic book. And I made it a point to read that book from beginning to end. And I used to carry that little book like it was my Bible, because the doctors really, they were not paying attention to me. They were dismissing my symptoms. So I felt that at the time that if I was going to be heard, I needed to understand the medical terminology, and I needed to go in there and demand certain things, but without knowing what to ask for, you feel at
Mhm,
a loss. So,
mhm.
I tried to learn what I could from that. And I eventually came across this one doctor, which to date, I still remember. This was actually when I was like 30 something. His name was Dr. Adams. And, I said to him, look, I said, I had every test done. And I said, I think that I have this condition. So he was skeptical, but he says, well, let's try the one thing that they haven't done. So he did a endoscopy and he tested me for celiac disease. And it came back positive. And it was like, wow. And I was, first of all, I didn't know what it was, but I was so happy that I had celiac disease. But I
Yeah.
think it was because I just
Yeah.
was happy to finally have a diagnosis. So
Yeah.
after I composed to myself, I asked him what it was.
Yeah.
And he explained it to me, but he didn't know how to deal with it. So he sent me to Dr. Green at Columbia Presbyterian, who was, the main doctor that treated celiac disease at that time. And when I went to him, he confirmed, yeah, I have celiac disease. At the time, they didn't know really too much about it. So the only solution was to go on a gluten-free diet. So I did. So I know now better, but what's wrong with the gluten-free diet? Majority of the foods that they give you, or the pangas and stuff like that, are made out of almond flour. And almond flour is high oxalates. So it's almost like I jumped out of a frying pan into the skillet. And not even knowing it, I was really harming myself by following this gluten-free diet. And
Right.
yeah, and one thing led to the other. And I think it really hit me hard when I got into my 40s, because also I was put on a birth control pills to manage endometriosis, which I know now was not the best option, but I didn't know then what I know now. And I think when I came off that, it really threw my whole system out of balance, and not only the hormones, but everything just it was like an explosion of everything that can go wrong did go wrong. Um,
Eesh.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So did you have kind of a period of, things were calm after you went gluten free and made some diet changes, were things starting to be better, or not necessarily?
I at that point, I stopped dealing with conventional medicine, and that's when I started exploring alternative solutions and looking into what else is out there, natural. So I came across a functional doctor at the time, who did my organic acid test. And that's when I learned that I had oxalate, high
Mm,
oxalate. But even
yeah.
then, it was not really like the main focus of the problem. And I think it's also because even in the alternative world, oxalates is not really addressed
Mhm.
as much as it should be. So I went on a keto diet. I did have gut bacteria and I had candida and all these other things. But when I went on that keto diet was when I experienced, like a honeymoon phase for like a couple of months. Everything was beautiful. I got more lean, I had more energy. And then all of a sudden, almost like within a week's time, everything turned south. I started breaking out. I started having joint pain. Everything was going wrong. I'm like, what is this? And I started going to the doctor. They started treating me for acne, but it really was not acne. I thought it was at the time. And I was just at a loss, I had recurring UTIs. I had burning urination. Everything that can go wrong was going wrong. Even the mental fog was severe. I remember when I used to work back then, I used to do physical therapy, and coming home, it was always really scary because within a second, I would be on the highway and all of a sudden, I've been through there probably 100 times, but for a split second, I would not know where I was. And I remember sometimes calling my husband and crying, I don't know where I'm at. I'm heading straight in, and then after a few seconds, like it would come back to me where I was. But that used to be really scary. And I had severe mental brain fog. And I believe it was because I had the oxalates also in my brain as well.
Wow. So let's can you kind of explain? I would love, maybe just kind of a brief explanation of what oxalates are and the food sources of oxalates, and then kind of how you actually found that oxalates were your problem.
Okay, so oxalates, they're pretty much in every plant-based food. It's in the plants, it's oxalic acid. It's really what plants use to protect themselves from not being eaten by insects. But also it's a way for plants to absorb the calcium. Now, when our guts are functioning properly, which the majority of the people in the world, it's not because of all of the pesticides and herbicides that they use. But, what should happen is that when we eat these types of foods that are high oxalates, our gut bacteria produces certain enzymes that break down these oxalates. We ourselves cannot break down these oxalates, but we should have certain bacteria that do. One specific one is the Oxalobacter, but that one has been killed off probably sometimes even in your early childhood years from all the vaccines and antibiotics that we're given, growing up. So, so it's found there, but the body also produces it as a metabolic waste through different pathways. And when we absorb this, the body can only take about or metabolize about 200 milligrams. And that's if you have a good working gut, okay?
And that's a day per day?
Per day.
Yeah.
So that's when, these green smoothie fats are a real big problem because they've been advertised as being so healthy for you. And people are drinking this stuff, not realizing that they're taking about 1,000 milligrams of oxalates in one smoothie.
Wow.
So if you're already starting off with gut issues, which most of us do, if you've never had a GI map, you wouldn't know, but most of us have gut bacteria. We probably have H. pylori and don't even know we have parasites. And we have leaky gut to some degree. We're just absorbing these things. And over time, the body knows that it doesn't belong in your system, so it starts to pull it out of the blood and it deposits it in different body tissues. And over time, you just accumulate this stuff, and it starts showing up as arthritis, as fibromyalgia, as joint pain, acne, tendinitis, bursitis. So when you go to the doctor, depending what body part is involved, that's the label you get, right? But I think many of our health issues may be linked to an oxalate problem, and more than half of the population doesn't even know it. And the way that I discover, or the best way to discover this really, is doing an organic acid test, because there is a 24-hour urine test, and there's also a blood plasma oxalate test. But I have done all three of them within a 24-hour time separation between the three of them, because I wanted for myself to research which of the three will show up or give me the best information. And the two that I did through conventional medicine failed to detect that I had an oxalate problem. The urine test from the doctor's office, the 24-hour urine test failed, and the blood plasma failed. However, the organic acid test, which is a functional test, that one clearly showed that I had the oxalate toxicity. So out of all three, if anyone is going to pick one, that would be the one that I would say would be the most reliable one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good to know. Yeah. And that's something that a functional nutritionist can typically run for you, right? Or order for you.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Sally, there's one aspect of your oxalate symptoms that is crazy to me, if you don't mind talking about it. The skin issues, like what was really going on with the skin issues? If you want to go into more detail.
Yeah, the skin was, I think, one of the main big ones for me, because I started to get a skin breakout, okay, but what it felt like was fragments of pieces of glass under my skin, if you can imagine that. Like a pricking sensation. And then other times what I felt literally was like sharp objects running through my blood, like I had fragments of glass. And as I started to learn how to detox these from my system, my body chose to let them out from my back, from the side of my neck and my face, unfortunately. As I learned how to get rid of these things and get them out of my skin, and I would, do the other parts and then massage them out, I could literally see the pieces of oxalates. And they were almost like I used to call it like a shark tooth, because it literally looked like a little tiny triangle, really sharp end. And I think, and over time, as I've researched them, depending on what the oxalate has binded itself to, determines the shape or the color. So those that are like that are probably linked to calcium. And sometimes you can have some that look almost like a brownish color, which could be iron, because you can either have calcium oxalate, you can have iron oxalates, you can have manganese oxalate. The big problem with oxalate toxicity is that it steals your nutrients, especially all your minerals. It makes you deficient, and also your vitamins, because it uses up your vitamins.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. And I mean, it must have and this was happening before you knew what was going on. You were just like, what is going on?
That's the crazy part. And I think that that's where a lot of, at the time, the anxiety and the hopelessness and the desperation came in, that I was going through, because doctors didn't know what was what was going on. They didn't even know where to start, or they were treating it like it was an acne problem. It wasn't an acne problem. And yeah, many times I was, I was dumbfounded. So I spent hours and hours research, literally, it has taken me about 15 years to study oxalate metabolism, have an understanding of the pathways, because different pathways can create oxalates. And the more I studied it, the deeper the rabbit holes I found myself in, because it's a very complex thing. And what I find, like, the main way that you find on the internet and in groups of addressing this is by a low oxalate diet, which I believe is necessary in the beginning, but it goes so much deeper than that, because you can have a vitamin A deficiency, and that affects how certain enzymes respond and creates oxalates. You can be taking too much vitamin C beyond 500 milligrams, and it goes down a certain pathway and it creates oxalates. Or you can have certain enzymes that have been turned off because you're deficient in vitamin B1, and now that pathway, which is called the pentose pathway, is not working properly. So the oxalate problem is very complex, and it goes beyond just diet. Definitely diet, eating the wrong things can do it, but also having candida, mold, other pathogens, even H. pylori, all of these things also create their own oxalates in your body.
Wow, I had no idea. So yeah, so the approach, it sounds like, is pretty individual. So if someone does show high oxalates on an organic acids test, the fix is not one size fits all. It really depends on the rest of their biology and et cetera. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
one of the mistakes that I see a lot is that, when somebody does discover that they might have an oxalate problem, the focus is just on the diet, and they may be living on such a limited diet, or dietary options, because they're following a low oxalate diet, not realizing that the problem goes deeper than just the diet. It also you have to look at certain genetic mutations. Certain genetic mutations can make this the approach different for different people, like the AGT gene, which is referred to more as HP1, hyperoxaluria 1. Well, if somebody has that, you address that oxalate problem differently. If somebody has an oxalate problem due to vitamin B1 deficiency, that's addressed differently. If it's to mold, candida, that's a different protocol. So it's very, very individualized, and there is just no way that you can guess this. You have to test to really know what it is that you are dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. Really important for folks to know. One thing I was curious about is kidney stones. Are kidney stones typically caused by, oxalic acid? Is that correct? Or sometimes?
Yes, you can have different types of kidney stones, but someone who has a kidney stone, that is actually an oxalate metabolism problem. But that's the end result of the problem. So when you go to the doctor and you have an oxalate problem, they will never detect it. It's only if you have a kidney stone that maybe they'll say, oh, you have a kidney stone, but they never go that deep into, the why. So yeah, a kidney stone really extends from somebody having a oxalate metabolism problem, and that's the end result. And one other thing I wanted to add too, which sometimes I've seen even in my groups, some people, unfortunately, just following what they read because it worked for somebody else, and sometimes they expect it's going to work the same. You have to be really careful because one of the things that people take to help bind this is calcium citrate and potassium citrate, which helps. But you have to monitor it because when you're taking a supplement, you have to be mindful that if you're high dosing on one thing, what are you doing to the other vitamins and minerals in the body? They need to be balanced. And what happens sometimes is that people start taking potassium citrate and their urine becomes too alkaline. So now they have traded calcium oxalates for calcium phosphate crystals. And now they have joint crystals settling in the joints.
Ooh. Wow.
So yeah, it's not it definitely needs to be looked into, and you need to do testing for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Really interesting. So tell us about, how is your health now, and what is your maintenance regimen to really optimize your health now? And you're still clearing oxalates, right? So tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, I clearing the oxalates can be from a couple of months for some people to, for others, a 10-year process. I think I fall in that 10-year process because as birth, celiac and everything, I'm 6 years into clearing it, but I am nowhere near what it used to be. I do sometimes have minor oxalate dumps, but it's more, I could see it in my stool because you'll get grainy stool. So now I am able to eat certain foods that are considered medium oxalates, and I don't have a reaction to them, but I know how to protect myself. If I do, I'll have something that's like feta cheese a little bit because it helps to bind the oxalates, or I'll have calcium citrate with something that's a medium oxalate food. And if, let's say, I eat something that's medium oxalate today, I won't have it the next day or the day after that, so I balance it. I also do a lot of detoxing, for my body to, maintain my health. It's really important. I make sure that I have all my nutrients and vitamin levels where they should be, especially when you are working to get these oxalates out of your system, because every time that you have an oxalate dump, it strips you from your nutrients. And when you're lacking some of these nutrients, it's almost like a circle. You're going to be more susceptible to creating oxalates. So, and those are the ways that I take care of my health, and I try to eat organic, as much as possible, and stay away from certain foods that, processed foods, gluten-free foods that are processed that come in a box. I foods that are the way they should be in nature.
Right. Yes. Yeah. There's broccoli, which is gluten-free.
Right.
Maybe, yeah, it's different from a box of pancake mix that is gluten-free and it's all almond flour. Yeah,
Exactly.
Definitely. Yeah. So what are some of the highest oxalate foods out there?
Well, rhubarb is one of them, spinach, beets, chocolate.
Oh,
So I know many nuts, lots of nuts. There's one that's really, really high. It's star fruit. I don't know if you've heard, it's Chinese star fruit. I think you get about 800 milligrams in just 4 ounces of juice. That's a lot of milligrams. That's like your milligrams for like the next couple of days. So those are the main higher ones, and then there's others, you know. And the other thing that I also wanted to mention is that, and this is why I believe that the low oxalate diet is good as in the beginning, but it's not the only solution. And it's because even meat can turn to oxalates if your pathways are not working properly. Because when you eat meat, um, every type of food is really fuel for the body, but it gets converted through a certain pathway to into glycine. But if that pathway is missing certain nutrient deficiencies, it gets converted to oxalates. So,
Wow.
yeah.
My goodness. Yeah, yeah. So I guess for someone who suspects that oxalates could be a problem, yeah, it sounds like working with a functional nutritionist and getting the organic acids test is a good start.
Yeah,
Probably.
absolutely. Because just in my own healing journey, what I've discovered, you know, I originally started with the low oxalate diet years ago because I didn't know. But as I learned more and researched it, it also, you have to also consider the nutritional deficiencies, you know, the pathogens that may be present, you know, all of these things need to be addressed, because if you're just doing the low oxalate diet, um, and you're not addressing all these other things, it's like you're taking the garbage out the front door and somebody's bringing it into the back door, you know, because there's something else in there still producing more oxalates as you're dumping them out the front. So yeah, you know, you do have to do all of you look into all these areas. Sure.
Yeah. Right, right, absolutely. And this we haven't quite mentioned yet, inspired a career change for you to, become kind of an expert in it. Tell us more about, how this changed your career
Yeah.
trajectory.
Well, I did physical therapy assistant for about 27 years. And I worked with a lot of people, even, you know, some of the people that I worked were even younger than me at the time, you know, and it really got me to thinking, you know, how our choices when we're young can really affect us as we get older. You know, we don't think about it when we're young, but the choices that you make now and how you take care of your body now will determine how your body's going to take care of you later on in life.
Mm.
So, you know, and I used to see a lot of things, you know, and I would have wanted to be more helpful in certain areas, but because of the type of setting that I was working in, you know, I had to follow uh conventional, you know, practices. And, you know, and after just learning everything that I did, you know, I've always been passionate about functional medicine, but just seeing the transformation that it did in me really inspired me to pursue that passion, because I have not taken any type of medication for the past 20 years. I make
Wow.
I make my own stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I look into, you know, what are the active ingredients and herbs and what I'm dealing with. And, you know, I put things together, and that's how I've healed myself and some of my clients when they have issues. And that just inspired me to really bring awareness to people too, you know, that, you know, you can be healthy if you know what steps to take, you know, and enjoy life even into your more golden senior years, you know. So I felt that was more helpful. I could be of more help out here in hopes to, you know, prevent somebody from winding up in a nursing home. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, now you really carved out this expertise, so
mhm,
and bring so much with all your knowledge.
mhm.
So any kind of advice you would give to folks who may be struggling with health issues or oxalate toxicity? Is that the term, oxalate toxicity?
Yeah,
Or
oxalate
okay,
toxicity. Well, I would say that no symptoms does not mean you're healthy, because things can be brewing at the subclinical level and they may not be picked up yet. And if you're just relying on conventional lab testing, it's going to get missed because they don't use the advanced type of testing that's used in functional medicine to pick things up at the subclinical level. So that's number one.
Mhm.
It's a good idea to check yourself on a yearly basis, do a GI map, because we're constantly getting exposed to stuff. And if you do suspect that you have oxalate toxicity, an organic acid test is a good tool as to use as an analysis to see, if that may be the culprit to some of your health issues. And one of the things that I also learned just in my own journey too is that your health is priceless, right? And the longer that you wait to restore it, the harder, the harder it is that it's going to be to get it back, and the harder you're going to have to work for it if you
Yeah.
can get it back, because you have that small window of opportunity where you have that chance to turn things around and bring the body back to functioning properly. But if you wait too long, you miss that window of opportunity, and you move now into, instead of preventive care, is managed care, which is, you're dealing with a disease, managing your diabetes or managing blood pressure, heart issues, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Well, Sally, tell listeners where they can find and follow you on a
Sure.
regular basis.
Sure. So I have a website. It's under my name, Sally Aponte, Aponte. And I also have a Facebook group called The Gut Healer. So either one of those, you can find me.
Oh, nice. Okay, great. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, your super interesting story, and all the knowledge that has come from that. And I know folks will take away a lot from it, a lot of bits of wisdom. So we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. I'm glad to have this opportunity to share my story in hopes that it can help other people out there too, because I feel that, there needs to be an awareness about oxalate and all the juice, green juice bad and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I think all the superfoods that folks talk about, there can be too much of a good thing sometimes.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Too much things not good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sally. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.